Rick Strassman, welcome to the show.
Well, thanks, Tony. My pleasure.
I'm super honored to have you on here. I can't wait to dive in deep to see what you're up to and all that good stuff, what's on top of mind. But before we go into that, can you take a second or maybe a couple minutes, tell the audience who you are and what you do?
Well, somebody asked that question on a podcast yesterday, and I'm glad you mentioned a few minutes because after I was asked that question, I think I went on for 32 minutes.
Nice.
So that didn't give the interviewer much of a chance to ask questions, but I tried packing in an entire lifetime in one fell swoop. I will be briefer today. So I um, studied two psychedelic uh, drugs in Albuquerque, New Mexico, in the early 1990s, DMT and psilocybin. And these were the first new studies in humans giving psychedelics in a generation. We ran a lot of studies, a lot of people through the research protocols. I wrapped up in 95 and then wrote The Spirit Molecule, came out in 2001. It was a great story. Giving DMT and psilocybin during the war on drugs in a hospital room in Albuquerque was really, something. And I knew people would enjoy hearing the story. So I wrote that book. It's become quite popular. There is a documentary that came out, independent documentary based on the book. And in the meantime, after finishing my studies until 2008, I was practicing general psychiatry. Uh, I'm a psychiatrist by training. Yeah, I worked in community mental health, private practice, uh, prescribed a lot of antidepressants, and I did a lot of psychotherapy. And then retired from clinical work in 2008, and since then I've been writing. I have a book out on how the psychedelic state relates to Hebrew Bible prophecy. It's called The Soul of Prophecy. It's quite Bible oriented. I had to relearn biblical Hebrew and master Jewish philosophy. That took a long time. It was a 16, 18-year project.
Wow.
Um, and finished that book and got sick. Was sick for almost a year, and I took a lot of notes and wrote the book Joseph Levi Escapes Death, which is an account of that rather kind of morbid year-long period. It's a humorous book, though. It's categorized under humor on the website on Amazon. It's dark, kind of medical, psychological humor, but still, uh, people read the book and laugh. Um, so I've just published another book, which came out in August, just called The Psychedelic Handbook, which I will hold up in a shameless pitch.
Nice. Very cool.
Yeah, so this came out August 9th, and I was on the Joe Rogan show on August 9th. So the book has done quite well since then. Um, yeah, one of the most common questions I get nowadays is, why did I choose to write that book at this time?
Hmm.
Um, and my response has kind of evolved, but I'd say I felt some responsibility uh, to the field because our work started it in the U.S. And there's a lot of misinformation out there. There's a lot of ulterior motives. There's a lot of agendas. And because I'm relatively independent of any uh, you know, uh, close either academic or fiduciary relationship, I'm free to give a balanced view, to present the facts as they exist. So I thought a practical, informative, short, it's only 184 pages, uh, book that people could just learn about psychedelics, what they are, what they do, how they do it, what they're good for, what the risks are, the individual drugs, And the biggest chapter in the book is called How to Trip.
Hmm.
And it just gives a lot of guidelines to optimize your experience and minimize problems. A legal chapter, microdosing. Yeah, so it covers all the bases. And I have a lot of experience in the field, and I think it's a useful source of learning about psychedelics.
Absolutely. I would love to pivot over to, for you to share with us from your experience, what happens to their brain when someone's on that? What's going on?
Um, well, it's a chemical, and it gets into the brain. It has biological effects, which then takes us into pharmacology. Um, so it stimulates certain receptors in the brain, the ones in areas you would expect, like emotional parts of the brain, uh, I, um, visual parts of the brain, uh, the frontal lobes, the emotional limbic system. Um, and the main receptor is what's called the serotonin 2A. It's a kind of serotonin receptor. So that's one thing that they do is they stimulate, well, DMT and any other of the classical psychedelics like LSD or psilocybin. They all work in the same way, including DMT. Um, the drugs also seem to kind of loosen up the circuits in the brain responsible for our ego, our personality, our sense of self, and improves communication between areas of the brain that usually don't communicate with each other.
Hmm.
So you may remember things that were long forgotten but were stored someplace in the brain, and then they're allowed freer access. So that's another thing they do is they affect the circuitry of the brain.
Wow. And then also, just I'd love to hear like what's on top of mind for you these days. I know you have a lot going on. You got the book that you just released. You were just interviewed by Joe Rogan. I'd love to see, just what's on top of mind for Rick right now.
Well, right now I'm trying to just keep it together. Um, it was a hard book to write because I didn't have that much time. It's a new publisher, and their way of organizing uh, uh, the production of a book is a little bit faster paced than what I'm used to. But still, I'm quite pleased with the result. I went back and forth and back and forth. So it's a polished product. Um, yeah, so I completed the book, then was uh, planning on my strategy regarding uh, being on the Rogan podcast. I spent a good month, maybe 6 weeks, thinking about what's my approach going to be. What's my approach going to be? Yeah, and I settled on it, but still, it was on my mind all the time. And then the interview, and then it's been extremely busy. This is maybe interview number 35 or number 40 since August 9th. So I'm going to be taking a break. This is my last podcast for the foreseeable future. And I want to figure out what I want to do next. And I have some writing projects, uh, translation project of Genesis. I'm thinking of a book kind of tentatively entitled Altered States, and it will be an account of my altered states experiences, uh, description of them and interpretation of them, what they mean. Uh, how did this particular experience take place? Biologically, spiritually, psychologically. So, over the years, I've been taking notes on my altered states experiences. I've got quite a few pages, so I think it'll mostly involve polishing up and making sound a little more mature. Um, yeah, I've
Right.
been working on translation and commentary on the Book of Genesis. That's 1,200 pages right now. It's kind of a labor of love.
Wow.
And I'm close to finishing the first draft. So it feels good to imagine myself at my writing desk getting back to work on my own projects.
That's really cool. As we're coming to a close here, can you give out your website address or how they, if you want them to go to your website or where they can purchase the book or all that good stuff, and how they could also, if my audience could follow you, that'd be great.
Sure. Well, my website is rickstrassman.com, and I've got my email address prominently displayed there, so feel free to write me. You can order any of my books on my website too. I'll inscribe them as you desire, and I will sign them and ship them off. Um, yeah, I've got a Facebook page. I don't use Facebook all that much. If you want to communicate, it's much easier via my website.
Sounds good. Well, I appreciate your time. Thank you very much for taking the time out of your day to come over here and tell us about your knowledge. And also now we know about your books, and I really appreciate it.
Well, thanks, Tony. My pleasure.